Well, good evening and welcome to a few more people. Welcome to Nayoti, who joins us regularly from India, and we're very pleased to see you here. So we have a panel of experts on my screens. They're all lined up nicely. We have Simon Davis, who is an eco-architect who's done a lot of work in this area of how to lower your energy. And he'll tell you about them. Each of the panelists will tell you a little bit about themselves rather than me introduce them. But just to give you an overview, we have Chris Sadler from Kimball Tech, who is a designer and installer. And then to complete the process of what there's about solar, we have Emma, who has recently bought solar panels earlier this year and is going to represent solar owners and try and answer your questions about, what's it like to own solar panels? How does it help you, and what's been good and bad, etc. So as Jane says, please, once our speakers have finished, put your questions in the chat so that between Jane and I, we will field them and we will put the question, we hope, to the right panelists to start with, and each of our panelists can take over and add their penny's worth at any time they wish to. Okay, so if I may, I'm going to start in what I see as the order. I'm going to start with Simon, who's going to tell us a little bit about himself, and he's going to think about this evening more the planning, the design, what houses to put it onto. I know Chris can cover a lot of this as well. So the two of them are going to double hat this, I think, a little bit, but we'll start with Simon. Simon, if you would like to kick off.
Okay, good evening, everybody. Just to give you some background about myself. I've been an architect for 34 years. Of which the last 19 I've worked for myself. I've always had an interest from my time in university in low energy and sustainable design. My practice, Ben Design Architects, was based in Beaconsfield, which is where I've come across Rosie and Eddie. But I closed my office last year. I'm now working and living in Suffolk, and I've built a passive house for myself, which has a number of solar panels. In terms of my working career, started really in the 90s. I worked for a company called ECD, who stood for Energy Conscious Design. So they were a practice who promoted and practiced low energy design at a time probably when it wasn't very fashionable, to be honest. And the work I did there was varied. I worked on low energy houses, including a low energy exhibition house in Germany. We worked on, there was a lot of work at the time, government funded work, refurbishing tower blocks and medium and low rise social housing. We worked a lot on that. Probably the most interesting project I worked on was an extension to Linacre College in Oxford, which was the Green Building of the Year in a long time ago, 1996. So we were looking at low energy, a low energy building. We were looking at the materials, looking at the embodied energy in them, and we did install, in fact, a grey water recycling system, which, to be honest, I've never repeated. I've done a lot of rainwater harvesting for people, but not any grey water recycling. So I've always been interested in passive houses, and I've in my design, the way I design is always generally to follow those principles. So it's I think you've had a talk about passive houses design, but principally it's trying to make the most of solar gain in the design and of the layout and the glazing, because you don't need solar panels to benefit from the sun, the energy of the sun. Any building can benefit it with the right orientation, glazing, and design. So I've always tried to promote higher levels of insulation in the building regs. I've always tried to improve air tightness, and I've installed more efficient services and systems long before the building regs wanted them. And also you will have to consider, as with all passive houses, overheating and preventing that. So I think those are the principles I've always employed, and I'm a big advocate of passive houses. So I have so I've worked on, I've also worked on listed buildings, I should mention, and I think you can apply those principles there as well. You just have to be a bit more thoughtful about the design. I've installed heat pumps and air source heat pumps, ground source and air source, with mixed results, I would say. I'm much more an advocate of solar PV, and before that, solar thermal for hot water systems, hot water. So that's the way I feel we should be going, at solar PV and highly insulated houses and airtight houses. So the designs of houses I'm working on at the moment all integrate solar PV within them. So I think good design is not about it's not all about reducing your bills. It's about improving the quality of your environment, the house that you live in. And I think designing in that sort of passive house way with solar panels, I think is the way forward. And that's what is now encouraged by the new building regulations, which which came in June last year, to seeking about a 30% reduction in CO2. Okay. So while I've worked with many clients on mainly housing in the last 20 years, while it's not been necessarily everybody's aspiration to get a low energy house, I've always been able to persuade them to at least incorporate a number of features to improve that. And there have been a few where we've spent considerable amounts of money just fully upgrading an existing house. So
thank you very much, Simon. Could I get you to wrap up there and just conscious of?
Yeah, well, I can come to my photographs later. So yeah,
please.
The only thing I'd also just say is it's not just clients that need some education, but it's actually builders as well. So and some of you may have found that doing building work, they have a very rudimentary understanding of insulation and how things should go together to provide a low energy house. So anyway,
thank you very much.
Thank you.
So can I now turn to Chris to introduce himself and his business?
Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Sadler. I'm the owner of Kimball Tech, and I've been an electrician for 12 years. I've got a family background in construction. My dad ran a construction company for 25 years. And it was around about 5 years ago when I became very planet conscious, and I decided to adopt a plant-based lifestyle so that I could do good for the planet. And then I wanted to do more. And as an electrician, I was actually a DJ as well at the time. So I had an equipment rental business that hired out speakers and lights. And I wanted to do something good for the planet. And it seemed natural that maybe on the electrical side, I could move into renewable energy. So that's doing electric vehicle charge points, solar panels and battery storage. Now, it just so happened that the transition from me taking my electrical business into renewables was around about the time when the Ukraine war broke out. So there was that natural rise in energy prices, and then the demand for solar increased at the same time. So the timings of it sort of worked out. In some ways, it helped because there was suddenly a demand for solar, which made it a little bit easier for me to get the business off the ground. But on the other hand, there were so many people scrabbling around trying to get hold of components that there was a massive supply shortage, and trying to get hold of the equipment and the resources for it was also quite tricky. 2023, this year, has been a massive improvement. I think the supply chain has got back on top of things. So we are looking very positive at the moment. And it's a great industry to be in. I'm just glad that now my business can really do some good for the planet. So that's me in a nutshell. I hope you all had your tea, because we're in for an interesting evening even. So anything else, or is that my pitch done? Over to you, Emma.
I think that's great. Thanks, Chris.
No problem.
Emma is going to now talk a little bit about her solar installation.
Hello, everyone, and good evening. So my name is Maria Angeles. Everyone calls me MA, and I am definitely not an expert in solar panel installations. The reason I am here, I live in Amersham in Buckinghamshire, and I did have solar panels installed last March. So hopefully I can give you a little bit of a feel of what it's like to get solar panels. So I live in a 3-bedroom terrace house, quite a smallish house, and I had 10 Yinco solar panels installed in my roof, which is southeast facing. My installation is not really perfect, but we're actually really, really happy with it. We also installed a battery with it. So the size of the installation, I have 4.1 kilowatt peak for my solar panels, and my little battery, which is very costly, it's got 4.8 kilowatts as well. Our provider, it was Halo Energy, which got suggested by one of my friends here in Amersham, and I think it worked really well. The other thing that I did want to share with you guys is that my main motivation for doing this really was to clean our energy at home a little bit, but I did have to have a strong conversation with my partner and convince him on the economics of this. And actually, after putting the solar panels up, he's definitely being converted. So we are seeing quite a lot of energy coming in, and we do think that we'll pay them back. The estimation that they gave us when we got the solar panels was 8 years, and from what we are seeing, it does seem like that is quite realistic. I'm not going to talk anymore yet. If later on you guys want to hear more about the performance, I got some screenshots that I can share with you. And I think that's it from me now. Just happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you very much. I suggest that our panelists all come off mute now, as we will be passing the ball to you. So straight in there with questions, we've got a few people, and we've just been talking, Emma's just mentioned about the payback she's looking for. So Eddie has asked a question, what is the average payback period for solar panels at the moment? Because I'm guessing it varies as the energy price varies. So I'm going to pass that one to Chris, if I may.
No problem at all. Yeah, this is something that we come across every single day. So very in touch with the typical payback times that we see. Now, it is a simulation. It is only a prediction. There are 3 key factors that will affect your payback. One is the cost of energy, and we just simply don't know what the energy is going to be like in 10 years' time or in 20 years' time. But what we can do is look at historical data to see that there is a trend that energy does increase by around about 7% per year. But if you negate that against inflation, then you tend to see about a 3% increase year on year. So we can take that as an estimation, but that's about as good as it gets. The next thing is your usage. So for a lot of people, over, a solar system is typically designed to last 20 years, 30 years. So in that time, people's lifestyles are going to change. They might get an electric vehicle, they might get a heat pump, they might have family that perhaps move out of the house, or family that come back into the house. So usage will change, and that will obviously dramatically affect how quickly you will make your saving. And the third thing, of course, is the weather. Now, actually, this is the most predictable thing, because over a period of 10 years, you can be fairly, you can bank on the weather will eventually repeat the same sort of patterns, and it will give you a consistent result. And if you look back over 100 years, the weather hasn't really changed a great deal. So the weather's the predictable thing. The other two things aren't. But we have to give we have to use our best guess on this. And the modeling software usually comes out that the average payback would be around about 7 years. I'd say that for the average person. If your energy usage is low, then it will take longer to pay back. But if you've got really high energy usage, then generally speaking, you will make the savings a lot more quickly than if you have less energy. So yeah, typical savings would be around 7 years. Sometimes we see it come down as little as 5, and sometimes we see it being 11 or 12 years. It does depend on your situation and how well the system is designed for your particular situation.
Okay, lovely. Would either of our other panelists like to say anything? Just shake your head if you're a no.
Can I just say one thing? Oh, ask Chris. Was that just solar panels or solar panel and battery installation?
That is based on, yeah, that's solar and battery. So
right.
Yeah, to explain that. Now it's pretty much a no-brainer that you would have a battery installed with your solar system, and it does increase. Again, our software will simulate how that can increase the payback time. But for the basic figures are that you will get between 30 and 50% of your solar generation you can use directly, and if you add a battery, then you can increase that by around about another 40%. You should be able to get out of it. So typically with a battery, you can get about 80% usage on average, and without a battery, you may be looking at about 40%. Those sort of figures.
Okay. Now I'm going to jump to a Chris question. What about PVT, which I'm taking to mean, well, actually, I'm not sure. What PVT? It's not a name I've seen before. PVT panels?
No, you've got me there. PVT.
I don't know either.
So, Chris, could Chris please put in his chat exactly what he's meaning? But I was going to ask about using solar to heat hot water. And I know, Simon, I've had conversations with you in the past about this. So if somebody was wondering what type of solar, do they want panels or hot water? What are the things for them to be thinking about?
Okay, there's solar thermal, which is the older system that we used to install 10, 15, 20 years ago, but further than that, which is very efficient at heating hot water, but that's all it does. For a relatively small panel size, you can heat a tank of hot water relatively quickly. Solar PV will heat your hot water tank, but it's less efficient. It takes far greater panel area to heat that hot water. Having said that, I decided that I was not going to install both systems. I would only install one. So I've installed solar PV. I have, just to let you know, I've got an 8 kilowatt installation. So it's producing quite a lot of power. And it probably takes me an hour to heat up the tank. I'll just mention the tank, just a few quick things about the tank. It needs to be a modern, highly insulated tank. Ideally with two, if you're thinking of changing your hot water cylinder, ideally with two immersion heaters, top and bottom. Insulating the pipework that goes into the tank is always a good thing because it reduces the rate it cools down. And then something that Chris may mention, or he's got a view on, is a device to divert any excess solar to heat up your hot water. That is a very good, I believe, a very good device to use. So, and many of you probably have a solar diverter to heat, so the excess solar heats up your hot water as a priority.
Okay,
Yeah.
lovely. Chris, I know you've played with both systems personally, and you probably know all about it. You any thoughts on, what are the considerations people should have if they're thinking one or the other or both?
It's what we've been finding is most people want to eventually get rid of their solar thermal. So that's the one that heats up the hot water cylinder only, and they want to just stick with solar PV. Solar thermal, yes, you can get more energy out of it than effectively a solar panel has to convert that energy into that light energy into electricity before it can go into the hot water cylinder. So it's not quite as efficient. However, I think it's more adaptable by having, when you've got electricity, you can choose what you do with it. So you can choose to use it directly for your appliances, or you can charge a battery, you can charge your car. You've got the energy there to do what you want with it. Whereas with the solar thermal, it's just purely for your cylinder. Now, roof spaces, we find a lot of the time the roof space is the limiting factor on how many PV panels we can fit into a system. Most people could probably do with a few more panels than what we are able to fit. So having solar thermal is going to take up that space, and you haven't got that versatility by having it. It also doesn't look as good. So aesthetics do come into it. People do care about how things look on their roofs. So if you've got some nice solar PV panels, and the ones that we fit these days, they're all completely black, so really, really smart looking. And then the solar thermal next to it just sort of is a bit of an eyesore. But yeah, that's just aesthetics.
Okay.
From my perspective, sorry, just from my perspective, from my experience, we did not have a hot water tank, so that was not an option for us.
Yeah. So I'm going to just ask one more question about PVs, so that's photovoltaics, because Ian has asked the question, solar cell efficiencies are improving each year. Where are we now? So I'm going to bat that one straight to you, Chris.
Yeah. So it might sound that this is quite a low number when I tell you that we're at 22%. You think, why can't we get more energy than that? But 22% is a massive improvement on where we were 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, the best you generally got out of a panel was 16%. And then in the last sort of 2 to 3 years, the technology's really improved, and they found ways of getting more out of the same sort of silicon cell. So we're now at about 22%. Most panels will be around 21, but I was at the trade show yesterday, and they've got the panel, a Jinko panel that's at over 22% efficient now. So if you compare that to if we were 16% 10 years ago, then, and we're 22% now, you could say, there's like a quick maths here, but no, 50% improvement on efficiency there. So getting better, it's getting there. I think we're probably maxed out though what we can do with silicon. I don't think that's the main component of a solar panel is silicon, and I believe we are pretty much at the limit of what we can do with silicon.
Okay.
I did see, sorry Rose, I did see another question. I don't know if you're coming to it, but someone did clarify on PVT. I don't know if you want me to that as well.
Yeah,
now.
actually, let's get the clarification of PVT, and then I'm going to go on to using your solar type questions for a while. So, Chris, Chris said that PVT contains a coolant as PV panels generate less electricity. So, Chris, do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's so solar PV panels, they perform better when they're kept cold. So if you've got perfect scenario being up a mountain where you've got really cold air but bright sunshine, solar panels thrive in those conditions. So the hotter they get, the less they perform. So tend to find in the summer, especially in July and August, when the temperatures tend to be quite hot, although it's sunny, you often find that maybe May and June there's slightly better performance because the air temperature is cooler. These panels, it's a new concept that, and again, yesterday we were at a trade show up in Birmingham, the leading trade show in the UK, and I didn't see them there at all. So I think it's still a concept that hasn't really made it out to market yet. But the idea being is that the coolant is pumped around the panels, so it not only cools the panels down, which will then help them to perform better, but then that heats up the coolant, which you could then use to perhaps heat your hot water. So it's almost like taking your solar thermal and your solar PV and combining it into a single panel. I'm looking forward to when that reaches market mainstream.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to turn now to some questions about making the best use of your solar panels, because just putting them in is only the start of it all, as I have found out myself. So I'm going to move to MA then. What tips do you have for making the best use of solar panels and a battery once you have them?
I don't know that we have many tips. I mean, when we started using these, we were trying to concentrate on running our main bit of use during the day. But to be fair, we have realized that with the battery, we can pretty much spread it out. So there's not much there. And the other only thing that I would say is that we are starting to look into using more electricity now. So we're starting to look into getting a car. And I think this is what happens once you get one of these things, it leads you to the next one. So we will get, our next car will be an electric car probably quite soon. And we're also looking into getting a heat pump at some point, although that is quite a big investment as well. But I think from the top of my head, I don't have any other tips.
Okay, so I'm going to invite, we've got something like 42% of the audience has solar panels. And so could I invite all solar panel users to put your best tip in, the thing that probably has surprised you the most that you've changed or that you found you could do? So while they're doing that, I'm going to ask Simon as a user, but you're in a passive house. How has it affected your behavior in terms of your energy use, and not so much your energy use, but how you think about energy use?
Okay, we're all electric in this house. There's no gas, and we decided not to get oil. So we have electric heating, electric hot water, and so it's an all electric house. We don't have a battery. We decided not to get one at the time we put the panels in, and to see how battery technology changed and moved on. We are a very low user, and actually financially a battery doesn't necessarily make economic sense for us. What it would do would make life a lot easier and more convenient, because at the moment we have a device that shows when we're exporting power or where we're importing electricity, and it's a very manual process. Putting the heating on, putting the hot water is automatic because we've got what's called an iBoost, which some of you may have. It's a solar diverter to the hot water cylinder. But when we've got excess power, we will use it for, my wife will put the washing machine on when the light goes green. So it's a very manual process of turning heating on. A battery would smooth that over. We wouldn't be running around. We'd have a storage. We'd have an amount of electricity we can draw upon. So while the benefit is not, let's say, a battery economic, it would make life a lot more straightforward. We could program our radiators to come on at set times without too much concern about suddenly dropping into importing electricity. So I don't know how many other people have don't have just solar and not without a battery. So.
Okay. So thank you for that, Chris. I'm not going to ask you, I know you're a big fan of all this, but you can have plenty of other questions coming up. But I just want to point out to people who are not perhaps following the chat, there's several good tips. I think a really important tip that might not be obvious is that because if you put your energy into the battery, you have a small loss as you put it in, and you have a small loss as you take it out. That's why Tim and Liz at Podesta are saying use the power while the sun is shining, because you're not going to even make that loss. So the top tip I've got is be in when the sun is shining, so you can run around and put all your machines on, or make sure that, and I think Philip and Richard has said, is don't use all your things at once, sequence them. So these are really important things, but it does strike you that you need to be thinking about your appliances, and I think that's the big message. You need to be thinking about what order you use them in and why. So I'm going to go. Yeah.
I'd just like to say something. Henry, who is here, actually wrote to me before this meeting with all sorts of thoughts, and something I thought was quite interesting. She works from home, so she's able to do what you're describing, you know, switch the washing machine on when the sun is shining and that kind of stuff. But you would need what she describes as some very nifty time controls if you were out at work all day. So I thought that was quite an interesting point.
Yeah, definitely. You probably want appliances that can delay to a particular time, etc. So I'd like to go to another one about using energy, about using your solar. And Eve has asked, I'd like to hear how much of your household energy costs have been covered by your panels now, Emmy. So Emmy, can we go to that? How much of your household?
So since I got them in March, I have not imported that much energy. I can show you, maybe let me show you one slide here that may be interesting. Just bear with me for a second. So here you have a screenshot of the application that they gave me. It comes from the inverter. And what I want to, if you have a look, you'll see two graphs. The one at the top is the energy that I produce, and you know it shows whether I use it goes to the battery or what, or I export it. The bottom one is what I actually consume. So if you see the red bar at the bottom, that's what I import from the network. So it's very little. And if you see the numbers that I have here on the left, just listed there. So I consumed that since March. We just had a look at the numbers yesterday night. So since March, we consume 1,800 kilowatt hour, and we imported 200 kilowatt hour. So it's very little, and we exported a lot. And you see some numbers in terms of savings with the amounts that are charged. So we're very happy. We have not imported that much. Of course, these are the best months of the year, right? From March to now, especially with the stretch that we had in September and October. They are the best months, but still we're doing really well in that respect.
Great.
Thank you for that. So a question, I think, Emma, further down was, and how many of you are in the household?
So there's three of us, me, my partner, I got a small 4-year-old as well. So there is three of us. We do work from home as well, so we do use electricity throughout the day as well.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. If I could ask you to take your screen share off, you've got more to go. Good.
There we go.
So I'm going to now go to a question about how easy is it to get your solar, to put it up, because there's a question here about some years ago we were told that we had too much tree cover for the panels. Have they become more efficient in recent times? So Chris, can I get you to talk about tree cover?
Yeah, shading is still a big problem. Yes, the panels, they will generate in diffused light, so in indirectly light, it will work. It's just you're not going to get the quantity or the abundance of energy is if those trees aren't there. So anything that goes from, if you go from west all the way around south, so I'm going backwards here, so I'm doing the mirror image. Let me go from east. So if you go all the way from east around to west through the southern hemisphere, that 180 degrees anything in that path is going to be considered as having an effect on your generation. And again, anything up to 60 degrees in terms of the pitch. Anything over 60, anything less than 60 degrees, it will get the sunshine in the summer. But so yeah, long story short, it's still an issue. There are things called optimizers which will help, but if you've got a particular roof that is just completely overlooked by trees, then it's still not going to be a particularly great investment for you unless you can do something about the trees.
Okay, there's an environmentalist dilemma: cut down a tree to get more solar. It doesn't sound like an easy thing. So Richard asked, any advice on selecting the inverter size for use with a battery? So Chris, can I get you to go a little bit wider and just explain what an inverter is and how it affects your choices and how you use your solar?
Yeah, no worries. So solar panels produce something called DC electricity, and you can't use that directly in your home. It won't power your appliances. So what it has to do, it has to go through something called an inverter. An inverter is a box about this big, typically goes on your wall, and it will take the DC electricity and convert it into AC. And the AC electricity is what you can use in your home. It's what the grid provides to you as well. So, so that's what an inverter is. In terms of sizing your inverter, there's a tendency for people to look at how much. So solar panels will have a power rating on them. Let's take, for example, it's got 400 watts is the power rating of a panel. And if you have 10 panels, then you would have a 4 kilowatt solar array. Now, that system won't produce 4 kilowatts day in, day out. It will produce it around about midday on a very sunny day in the middle of summer. Most of the time, it won't be producing 4 kilowatts. It will be producing much less. And if you take a particularly rainy day, or if you've got some shading or things like that, then for the most part, it will be performing maybe around about 1 or 2 kilowatts. So when you size the inverter, it's quite common that you will oversize the number of panels you have compared to the inverter. A typical inverter size is 3.6 kilowatts. And there's a reason for that, because the people that own the power lines, they don't like it too much when you install something bigger than that. But they've set a limit, and they said, if you go to 3.6, then you can install it and they won't give you any trouble for it. So on that note, 3.6 is a very common inverter size, but that means you shouldn't be looking at maybe limiting yourself to 3.6 of panels. I would suggest you could go to 4, even 5, possibly a bit beyond that as well. So you can oversize it. And you might say, well, why would I do that? On a nice sunny day, my panels are making 5 kilowatts, but I can only get hold of 3.6. Well, the difference is that when you go later into autumn, or if you go into spring, when there isn't as much energy in the sun, if you have more panels, I like to think of them as nets that catch more sunlight. So when the sun is weaker in the wintertime, in the autumn and the spring, then your net is bigger and you're going to be able to collect more energy and still make it work for your inverter. So it's still wise to add more panels on than the rating of the inverter. I will just do one more point on that. Now we're adding battery storage to inverters. Most inverters now, the battery will connect to the inverter in most cases with something called a hybrid inverter. So the panels and the battery both connect to the inverter, and the inverter is what gives you the electricity. If your array, your solar panels, are producing more than what the inverter can deliver to your home, that excess power can go directly into your battery. So you're not really going to lose any energy in that respect, unless your battery is completely full. And then at that point, yes, it's going to be lost. But to be honest, that would happen maybe later in the afternoon when the sun will have perhaps died down a bit and you won't have quite as much energy. So to summarize that, oversizing of PV panels, maybe 20 to 50% more than what the inverter is rated at is usually quite a wise choice.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I want to go back to a question that was about the reliability of channels and also how long we should expect them to last. So I'm going to, well, both Chris and Simon, I know, have had panels a good while. So I'm going to ask Chris to give us the current view. And then Simon, if you've got anything to add from experience of things that might affect it. So first off, should you expect problems in the first year? Is there a bedding down period? And also then once they're up and running, is there maintenance? Do you have to do stuff to keep them going?
Yeah, they're meant to be fairly passive things that don't that shouldn't go wrong, and they do have very long warranties on them. Most manufacturers will give you a 25-year performance warranty, and sometimes the product warranty may even be longer than that. The things that can affect it is dirt and debris that can cause a panel to fail prematurely. If there is shading, or well, shading's not so much an issue because shading will always move. But if you have, let's say you've got debris on your panel, that is going to create effectively a shadow over that cell, and it means that the rest of the panel is going to have to work harder to compensate for it. You tend to get things called hotspots, and that's when a panel can lead to basically fail prematurely. So in terms of maintenance, you do need to keep your panels clean. And if you were to try and make a warranty claim on a panel and they can see that it was dirty, then that you might struggle with. I wouldn't necessarily be too concerned about panel warranties because I think they're perhaps a little bit fickle in what they offer. Because if something goes wrong, let's say in 24 years' time, you go, my panels stop performing, and it's a 25-year warranty, that panel won't be in production anymore. And the chances are that they won't be saying to you, no worries, we'll pay for your scaffolding to go back on the roof and swap it out. So it might just be that you just get effectively refunded the value of the panel. So, but in terms of maintenance, then a panel clean, certainly an inspection to make sure that you can't see any dirt or residue on the panels that may be causing it to underperform. And if you can get an annual wash in, then that's worth doing. It is a little bit of a specialist thing. You don't just want to call up any old window cleaner and say, can you quickly wash my panels? If you are going to wash your panels, you must turn them off first. Might come as a no-brainer, that one, but it's important that you turn the panels off first and don't use any detergents, anything like that. It's ideally you want deionized water or demineralized water. That's the ideal component. And again, nothing abrasive, just a soft brush or a soft sponge potentially to clean it, or contact a solar panel cleaning company.
Okay, well, thank you. Simon, anything you'd like to add to that?
Not really. My panels are nearly 5 years old. I've not had any problems with them, touch wood, or any reduction in performance or noticeable reduction. I've not had any clients I'm aware of that have had problems. So yeah, as far as I can tell, they're fairly reliable, and the inverter's been reliable. I haven't had any issues really at all. So
good. Okay.
I did forget to touch on pests, birds, and squirrel. So pigeons absolutely love to make nests under solar panels, and that in itself can create a few issues. Not just the mess that they create, but again, if they create nests, that tends to maybe restrict airflow, can lead to hotspots. And but yeah, the main thing is that they'll create nests, and then they will often that means that they will perch on the edge of the panels and just generally create a bit of a mess. So most systems now, or anybody who's getting a system, I would recommend that you get bird proofing done. It could be fitted retrospectively, but certainly if you're getting a new system, I would very much advise bird proofing is fitted at time of install.
I would reincide on that one. I did not do it, and we definitely have a family of pigeons there. So we're seeing what happens there. But definitely, if you're getting any installation, just get it from the beginning, because otherwise you're going to have to get scaffolding up again, and it's a bit of a mess.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to turn now to an interesting point I think quite a lot of people want to know about, and that is the energy you export, given that you can't always match. So let's talk about exporting energy, and then I think we'll take a question about things you can do to avoid needing to export your energy, including things you can add on. Okay, so I'd like to go to Emma. What are you obviously are on the Octopus tariff? Can you tell us a bit about that and how that works for you as an owner?
First to say that you have to sign in for this. So there's this smart export guarantee. So you will, after you get your panels, your provider will provide you a couple of certificates, and then you go to a company to register. You actually don't need to register for this with the same company you use for your electricity. I ended up moving to Octopus for both things, but you could be importing energy with one company and export to a different one. From what I looked at, Octopus was the one that paid you the most. So I started registering for the SEG with Octopus, and they just found that the deal was much better if I was doing both things with them. And yeah, Octopus pays me 15p per kilowatt hour, which is, I haven't seen anything similar with anyone else, and it's very good. It's basically half of what you're paying for energy. I think with my previous one, with Eon, it was, I don't know, maybe they were paying me 10% of what I was paying. So this is much better. It's a little bit of a process. You have to send them these couple of certificates, and then it takes a little while, but it's definitely worth it. And do it as soon as you get the panels. That will be my advice.
Okay, so I think anybody who's sitting here who has panels probably knows that your biggest irritation is finding that you're exporting, so you rush off and find some more washing or something to do. So we have a question: can we use an electric car battery as a battery? So I'm going to pass that back to Chris.
Not yet. It is there. It hasn't really been rolled out properly yet, and they're still in. It's still in a phase where people have done it, but it's not actually approved. The IET are the people that write the regs, and they're saying it's very, very difficult to. It gets very, very complex when you introduce this concept that your vehicle is going to be powering your home. How you design your electrical circuits around that is they're still trying to catch up. There's still it opens up a lot of opportunity for there to be mistakes and errors made, like electrical critical safety ones to be made. So it's still it's not fully rolled out yet, but it makes a lot of sense. And I imagine in the next year to 2 years, they will start rolling this out properly. To put it into perspective, an electric vehicle has around about between, say, 60 and 90 kilowatt hours of battery storage, and a home battery is around about 5 to 10. So an electric vehicle is almost 10 times the amount that you would have in a typical home battery. So for the for the country, or even for the planet, for us to hit net zero, we need to be able to store energy when we don't need it and use it when we do need it. And this whole concept of being able to use a car is that perhaps around about dinner time, you can cook your dinner, use all your electricity, use your car to do that, and then overnight it will then recharge off the grid again. And that way, then the grid, the energy suppliers, they can use your vehicle as a way to discharge and charge when the grid needs it. And that's the way that we're going to really help to sort of decongest the electricity supply. If that helps.
Okay, so on top of that, in terms of the relationship to the car, I think there's been a question and a point made that you can, though, store your excess electricity into your car. But as I understand it, you have to have an EV charger that allows you to talk to the inverter. Is that right, Chris? So it's you need to think ahead. If you're not got an EV charger, you need to think ahead that you might have your solar going into your car.
Yeah. So I don't know if I misunderstood the previous question. I thought it was about charging your
Yeah,
home
no,
from the
it
vehicle.
was, yes.
Okay.
It's just that you can do a one-way. You can't take it back out your car, but you can put it in from your solar. But not all EV chargers can do that, or can they all now do it?
You want an EV charger that will monitor your home's energy usage, so it knows if you are exporting any energy, and then it will charge up the car instead. So it's just a way of limiting export. Now, it just so happens that MA's got a very good export rate. 15 pence is nothing to be sniffed at, whereas a lot of other people will only offer maybe 4 pence or 3 pence. So if that's all you're going to get for exporting, you're better off putting it into your car. Now, you can't just leave your car plugged in, otherwise it will just always charge up. But if you have an EV charger that is solar enabled, and there are, I would say most modern chargers now will probably offer this because they recognize the age that we're in, and you can set the car so it will only charge when you're generating surplus solar energy. So that means that your home appliances aren't needing the energy, your battery's full, and the last place for the energy to go is out onto the grid. So what it will do is it will turn on the car charger and it will charge the car up at the exact same rate that you're exporting. So effectively, you're not going to export anything, you're just going to charge up your car from solar energy. And then when the sun goes down and the energy depletes, then it will stop charging the car so that you're not pulling energy from the grid.
Okay, Jane, I'm conscious of our time. Do we have time for one more question, or shall we stop there?
Let's have one more question. This is a completely different type of question from Nagioti. What about disposal of or recycling of solar panels? What information does the panel have about that?
Shall I jump in there?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are recycling centers that take solar panels. So sorry, not like your local household center. I think there's about 10 companies nationwide that will take panels to recycle them. So it's a difficult product to recycle at present, but naturally a lot of people are now coming around to this point where they go, well, I've had my panels for 10, 12 years. I've got my money back from feed-in tariff, and I now see that panels are more efficient. I want to strip my roof off my old panels and I want to put a bigger system on. So we are seeing that, and there are some companies that will recycle it. Unfortunately, I don't know what the detailed process is for recycling, but you certainly can't rock up at your local household recycling center and dump some solar panels with them. It does have to be through a approved recycling center.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, I'm going to
a very, very quick one, which is just how long does the SEG last? Emma, your SEG, how long does it last?
I don't know that it's got a limit.
Okay.
You caught me there.
Okay. No, I mean, if they haven't told you it has, perhaps it hasn't.
Feed-in tariff, they had a time limit on there. That was because it was government backed, but the SEG, which is Smart Export Guarantee, that is down to the energy provider. So there's no particular time limit, and ultimately it's up to them how much they want to award you for exporting.
Okay. Brilliant. There are quite a few people who've answered questions in the chat without us having to ask our panel. So that's really, really great. Thank you, anybody who's done that. What do you think, Rosie?
I would just like to say that we will wash up there. I think just a huge thank you. And even if you are on mute, we can all give a visible to our panelists. So thank them very much.
Thank you very much indeed.
It's been very, very informative, and I really appreciate you being here, the three of you tonight, with the